Don't scroll. If you were guided to this message today, it may not be an accident. Your soulmate's secret document is finally moving toward the light, and the truth hidden inside it could explain everything you've been feeling lately. Before you skip, understand this: the next few moments may reveal why your heart has been restless, why certain dreams keep repeating, and why someone you've never been able to forget has been silently carrying a truth about you for much longer than you realize. Stay until the very end, because the final revelation is the one your soulmate has been afraid would one day reach you, and once you hear it, nothing about this connection will feel the same again. There was a moment when your soulmate believed some secrets should remain buried forever. They convinced themselves that protecting the truth would protect both hearts. They smiled in front of others, continued living their daily life, and acted as though nothing unusual was happening, but behind closed doors a completely different story was unfolding. Hidden inside a private folder, locked notebook, or forgotten document was something they never imagined would become so important. It wasn't filled with ordinary information. It contained dates they couldn't explain, dreams they couldn't forget, emotions they couldn't describe, and one mysterious person whose presence kept appearing throughout every chapter of their life. That person was you. At first they thought it was only coincidence. They believed the strange feelings would disappear with time. Every time they tried to ignore them, another unexpected sign appeared. A familiar song would suddenly play. A dream would return. Exactly the same way. A place they had never visited would somehow feel connected to someone they hadn't even met properly. The more they searched for logical answers, the stronger the mystery became. One evening they opened that secret document again. They weren't searching for love. They weren't searching for destiny. They simply wanted to understand why their own thoughts refused to leave them alone. As they slowly read through every page, they noticed something that sent chills through their entire body. Every important turning point in their life somehow connected back to the same invisible presence. They realized they had been unknowingly writing about one soul over and over again without fully understanding who that soul was. They stared at the pages for several minutes without moving. Their breathing became heavier because, for the first time, they accepted the possibility that destiny had been guiding their heart long before their mind was ready to believe it. Since that day they have protected the document more carefully than ever before. They have hidden it from curious eyes. They have avoided conversations that come too close to its contents. They have smiled whenever someone asked if everything was fine, while secretly carrying words powerful enough to change both your lives forever. What makes this document different is not the paper, the file, or the notebook itself. It is what has been written inside. Every page reveals another layer of feelings they never had the courage to speak aloud. Every paragraph carries another silent confession. Every sentence becomes harder to ignore because it points toward the same conclusion. No matter how far they tried to run from these emotions, they always found themselves returning to you. They even questioned themselves many times. How can someone I barely understand already feel so familiar? Why does my heart react before my mind? Why do I feel like someone out there already knows a part of me that nobody else has ever seen? These questions remained unanswered for months, perhaps even years. But recently something unexpected happened. Someone mentioned your name. Or perhaps they saw something that reminded them of you. Maybe it was only a simple coincidence, but it unlocked memories they believed had disappeared forever. That single moment pushed them back toward the hidden document once again. This time they didn't stop reading halfway. This time they forced themselves to continue until the final page. And what they discovered there left them completely speechless. There was one final entry they barely remembered writing. It described a future meeting that hadn't happened yet but somehow felt incredibly real. It described emotions so detailed that they wondered whether destiny itself had guided their hand while writing those words. It even described fears that are beginning to come true today. Since reading those final pages, your soulmate has felt different. They have become quieter, more thoughtful. Sometimes they stare out the window without realizing how much time has passed. Sometimes they pick up their phone only to put it back down again. Sometimes they almost reach out, but fear convinces them to wait one more day. They worry that once the truth leaves the document, there will be no way to hide behind silence anymore. Because secrets lose their power the moment they are spoken. Yet destiny has its own timing. No matter how carefully they hide those pages, life continues creating situations that slowly bring everything closer to the surface. Strange coincidences are becoming more frequent. Familiar dreams are becoming clearer. The emotional distance between both of you is becoming harder to maintain. Deep inside, your soulmate already knows what is happening. They know this secret was never meant to stay hidden forever. The only thing they still don't know is how you will react when you finally discover what has been written about you all along. And the most shocking page of that secret document has still not been revealed. To be continued, the final page of your soulmate's secret document was never supposed to be seen by anyone else. They promised themselves that if life became too complicated, they would destroy it before another soul could ever read those words. But something stopped them every single time. Stay with me until the end, because the next hidden truth explains why your soulmate could never let that document disappear, and the reason has everything to do with you. They stared at the final page with trembling hands, reading the same lines again and again as if hoping the words would somehow change. But they never did. Instead, every time they returned to that page, the feeling inside their heart became stronger. It wasn't fear anymore. It wasn't confusion either. It was certainty. The kind of certainty that quietly grows after years of unanswered questions. That document wasn't simply recording memories. It had become a timeline of a connection that refused to fade. Long before your paths truly crossed, your soulmate had already written about someone who would arrive unexpectedly and change everything. They didn't know your face. They didn't know your voice. Yet the emotions described on those pages matched what they feel today more perfectly than they ever imagined possible. There were dates written beside certain entries, dates that meant nothing when they were first written but now seem impossible to ignore. Looking back, they realized that every important chapter of their life somehow moved them one step closer to you. Even the painful moments, the disappointments, the nights they cried without telling anyone, all seemed connected to preparing their heart for a meeting they couldn't yet understand. The strangest discovery came when they found a folded piece of paper hidden between the pages. They had completely forgotten placing it there. As they unfolded it, they saw a list of qualities they hoped the right person would have one day. Compassion, patience, loyalty, strength during difficult times, a heart that understands silence. As they read every word, one realization sent chills through their entire body. Without realizing it, they had been describing you all along. They closed the document and tried convincing themselves it was all coincidence. But coincidence has limits, and this was beginning to feel like something far greater. Since then, life around them has changed in quiet ways. They notice signs they once ignored. Certain songs suddenly remind them of you. Familiar places feel different. Random conversations somehow lead back to thoughts of you. Even when they try focusing on work or daily responsibilities, their heart keeps returning to the same unanswered question: what happens when this truth finally reaches them? They know revealing everything carries risks. What if you don't believe them? What if the document sounds impossible? What if years of hidden emotions are misunderstood in a single moment? Those fears have kept them silent far longer than they ever intended. But silence is becoming heavier with each passing day. There is another secret hidden inside the document that almost nobody knows. Near the very end, they wrote a promise to themselves. It wasn't addressed to family. It wasn't meant for friends. It was written for the person destiny would eventually place in front of them. The promise said they would never allow fear to destroy a connection that felt heaven-sent, no matter how long it took to find the courage. Every time they read those words now, they wonder if that moment has finally arrived. Lately they have sensed that something is shifting. The delays that once kept both of you apart are slowly losing their power. Situations that seemed impossible are beginning to change. Doors that remained closed for months are quietly opening. Your soulmate feels it, even if they cannot fully explain why. Deep inside, they believe the hidden document has completed its purpose. It protected the truth until the right season arrived. Now destiny itself seems to be asking them to stop hiding and start trusting. But before they can reveal everything, one final obstacle still stands in their way, and that obstacle is connected to a name written inside the document that they never expected to see again. When they discovered whose name appeared beside yours, their entire world stopped for a moment. To be continued. 1. Name. That was all it took to make your soulmate's hands begin to shake. Don't skip now, because the name hidden inside the secret document is connected to a truth that neither of you expected, and the final moments of this message may completely change the way you see your connection. They looked at the page again, hoping their eyes had made a mistake. But the name was still there, written clearly beside an old journal entry they had almost forgotten existed. For a few long moments they couldn't breathe properly. Memories they had buried years ago suddenly returned with incredible clarity. They remembered the exact day that entry was written. At that time they were confused, emotionally exhausted, and trying to understand why life kept leading them toward someone they hadn't fully met. They believed they were simply writing down random thoughts to clear their mind. But looking back today, those thoughts no longer seemed random. Every sentence appeared to be quietly predicting a future that is now beginning to unfold. The mysterious name wasn't written as an enemy. It wasn't written as someone to fear. Instead, it was connected to a moment that delayed your journey together. Your soulmate realized there had always been people, situations, and unexpected events standing between both of you. Every delay felt frustrating then, but now they understand something remarkable. If even one of those delays had never happened, both of you might have met before either heart was truly ready. Destiny wasn't keeping you apart to punish you. It was preparing both souls separately until the right season arrived. As this realization settled into their heart, they turned another page and found something even more unbelievable. Tucked inside the document was a small handwritten note they didn't remember writing. The ink had faded slightly with time, but the words were still easy to read. It said, "When the truth finally reaches the person I have been writing about, I hope they understand that silence never meant the absence of love. Silence only meant I was waiting for the moment fear could no longer control me." Your soulmate read those words over and over again. Their eyes filled with emotion, because they finally understood what their younger self had been trying to say. They hadn't been hiding because they didn't care. They had been hiding because they cared too deeply. They feared saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. They feared losing something that destiny itself had been carefully building. Over the past few weeks, those fears have started losing their power. Your soulmate has noticed changes they can't explain. Certain conversations seem to happen at exactly the right moment. Unexpected opportunities appear without warning. People who once discouraged them suddenly become silent. Obstacles that looked impossible begin disappearing one by one. It's almost as if life itself has started clearing the road ahead. Even more surprising are the dreams they've been having. In those dreams, they aren't searching anymore. They aren't running. They simply stand in front of someone whose presence fills them with an overwhelming sense of peace. They wake up unable to remember every detail, but one feeling always remains, the feeling that the waiting season is coming to an end. That's why the secret document has become so important again. It no longer feels like a collection of old memories. It feels like evidence that their heart recognized this connection long before their mind accepted it. Every page now carries new meaning. Every forgotten sentence now sounds like a message written across time. Yet there is still one page they have never shown anyone. It isn't because the words are embarrassing. It isn't because the truth is impossible to believe. It's because that final page contains a decision that could change both of your lives forever. At the bottom of the page, beneath everything else they had written, there is one final promise. They promised that when the signs became impossible to ignore, they would stop hiding behind fear and finally allow destiny to do what it had been trying to do all along. Recently, they believe that moment has arrived. But before they can fulfill that promise, one unexpected event is about to take place. Someone connected to the past is about to reveal a piece of information your soulmate never thought would surface again. That revelation won't just confirm everything written inside the secret document, it will also uncover one hidden truth about your connection that has remained buried until now. And when that truth is finally spoken aloud, your soulmate will realize there is no turning back anymore. To be continued. Don't scroll. You're closer to the truth than your soulmate ever imagined possible, and what happens next was written long before either of you understood why your paths kept crossing in invisible ways. Stay until the end, because the hidden truth revealed in the final pages of your soulmate's secret document is about to expose the one decision that has silently changed both of your lives. After discovering the forgotten promise, your soulmate couldn't sleep that night. They placed the document back into its hiding place, turned off the lights, and tried convincing themselves that everything would be easier if they simply ignored it again. But every time they closed their eyes, one sentence kept echoing in their mind. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, almost like a whisper. The truth always finds its way home. Those words refused to leave them alone. The next morning they returned to the document, determined to read every page from beginning to end without stopping. This time they noticed something they had completely missed before. Certain pages had tiny symbols drawn in the corners. At first they thought they were meaningless doodles, but after comparing them carefully, they realized every symbol appeared beside moments that later became major turning points in their life. The strange part was that the final symbol had never happened, at least not yet. It marked a future moment they had somehow written about before it existed. Their heart began racing. Could it really be possible that the document wasn't only recording the past, but quietly pointing toward the future as well? For hours they sat in complete silence, replaying every memory connected to those pages. Suddenly another realization struck them. Every delay, every heartbreak, every unexpected goodbye had happened shortly before something better entered their life. It was as if an invisible hand had been rearranging every chapter, protecting both of you from meeting before the right time. At first they felt angry for all the lost time. Then that anger slowly turned into gratitude. They understood that if destiny had rushed the story, neither of you would have recognized the connection for what it truly was. Some journeys require patience because hearts must grow before they can carry the weight of real love. That afternoon something unexpected happened. Their phone vibrated with a message from someone connected to their past. It wasn't a conversation they had been waiting for. In fact, it was someone they hadn't heard from in a very long time. The message was short, but it carried enough emotion to stop them in their tracks. It mentioned an old conversation, one that had taken place years earlier. "Curious, your soulmate replied." As the conversation unfolded, forgotten memories began returning one after another. Then came the sentence that changed everything. "Do you remember telling me there was someone you felt connected to even before you knew who they were?" Your soulmate froze. They had completely forgotten saying those words. Yet according to this person, they had spoken about that mysterious connection years ago. Long before your lives began moving closer together. Long before the signs became impossible to ignore. Long before they ever believed destiny could be real. Tears filled their eyes because this wasn't imagination anymore. Someone else remembered hearing those exact feelings years before. The document had not been rewritten. The memories had not been changed. Everything had remained exactly as it was. That realization removed the last piece of doubt from their heart. They finally accepted what they had spent so many years trying to deny. The connection they felt wasn't created yesterday. It had been quietly growing through time, waiting for the right season to reveal itself. But there was still one final envelope hidden inside the back cover of the document. They had never opened it after sealing it years ago. Their fingers trembled as they slowly broke the seal. Inside was a single folded page. No long letter. No explanation. Just one question written across the center of the paper. If destiny finally brings us together, will I have the courage to tell them everything? Your soulmate stared at that question for what felt like forever. Then, for the first time in years, they smiled. Not because every problem had disappeared, but because they finally knew the answer. Yes. The fear that had controlled them for so long was beginning to lose its grip. They could no longer hide behind silence. They could no longer pretend the document meant nothing. They could no longer ignore the signs surrounding both of you. Deep inside, they felt that the moment of truth was no longer far away. Yet destiny had saved one final surprise. Hidden beneath that folded page was something your soulmate had completely forgotten existed, a small photograph with a handwritten message on the back. The moment they turned it over and read those words, they realized the biggest secret had never been inside the document itself. It had been waiting beneath it all along. And that handwritten message is about to reveal a truth neither of you could have imagined. To be continued. Don't scroll. Your soulmate has finally uncovered the one thing they believed would remain hidden forever. Stay until the end, because the handwritten message behind the photograph is about to reveal why destiny refused to let your story end before it truly began, and the final sentence may explain everything that has been happening in silence. Your soulmate held the old photograph carefully, almost afraid that touching it would somehow erase the memory attached to it. The edges had faded with time, and the colors were no longer as bright as they once were. But that wasn't what captured their attention. It was the handwriting on the back. Familiar. Emotional. Honest. The kind of handwriting that only appears when someone writes directly from the heart. They slowly turned the photograph over and read the first line. The moment their eyes reached those words, their entire body froze. It wasn't a prediction. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't even a wish. It was a promise they had made to themselves years ago. If I ever find the person my heart keeps searching for, I will never let fear steal another chance. Those words hit them harder than they expected. For years they had forgotten this promise existed. Yet now, standing at the very moment they had once imagined, it returned exactly when they needed it most. They sat in complete silence, remembering every excuse they had used to avoid the truth. Maybe it's too late. Maybe they don't feel the same. Maybe destiny has changed its mind. But none of those excuses matched what was written in their own handwriting. Long before doubt entered their heart, they had already believed this connection was worth fighting for. As they continued reading, another paragraph appeared beneath the first. It described someone they had never fully met but somehow trusted with their future. They had written about eyes that carried peace, a presence that made fear disappear, and a feeling of home they couldn't explain. They paused for several moments because everything written there reflected what they now felt whenever they thought about you. The photograph wasn't revealing a new story. It was confirming one that had quietly existed all along. Suddenly another memory returned. They remembered hiding the photograph beneath the document after telling themselves, if destiny is real, one day I'll understand why I wrote this. That day had finally arrived. They realized they hadn't been imagining the signs. Every delay had protected something precious. Every disappointment had redirected them. Every unanswered question had quietly shaped them into the person they needed to become before meeting you. Then something happened they never expected. As they carefully placed the photograph back inside the document, a tiny folded note slipped onto the floor. They stared at it in surprise. They had no memory of placing another note there. Slowly they unfolded it. The paper was old, and the ink had faded slightly, but the message remained perfectly clear. When you read this again, it means you've stopped running from your heart. Those words broke every wall they had built around themselves. For the first time in years, they stopped asking whether this connection was real. Instead, they began asking how much longer they could keep the truth hidden. They knew the answer. Not much longer. Over the next few days, unusual things continued happening. Familiar numbers appeared repeatedly. Unexpected conversations pointed toward the same subject. Songs they hadn't heard in years suddenly played in random places. Even strangers unknowingly spoke words that reminded them of the promise hidden inside that document. It was almost as though life itself had begun whispering the same message from every direction. It's time. Still, one fear remained. They wondered whether revealing everything would change the connection forever. What if the document sounded unbelievable? What if years of silent feelings became too overwhelming all at once? But then they remembered something written near the beginning of the journal. The right person won't fear the truth. They'll understand why it took so long to speak. Reading those words gave them a peace they hadn't felt in years. They finally realized the document had never been created to hide from destiny. It had been created to preserve the truth until the perfect moment arrived. And now that moment was closer than ever before. Yet, just as they prepared to close the document for what they believed would be the final time, they noticed one last detail they had somehow overlooked. Pressed carefully between the final pages was a sealed envelope with only 3 handwritten words across the front. Open. Together someday. Their hands immediately began trembling. They had absolutely no memory of writing or sealing that envelope. They held it against their heart, wondering what could possibly be inside that had remained untouched for so many years. For a brief moment, they almost opened it alone. But something deep inside stopped them. It felt wrong. The envelope wasn't meant to be opened by one person. It was waiting for two hearts to stand together at the same moment. And as your soulmate looked at those three simple words, they whispered something they had never admitted out loud before. I think that day is finally coming. But what neither of them knows yet, is that the contents of that sealed envelope will reveal the biggest secret of all, a truth powerful enough to change the future forever. To be continued. Don't scroll. Your soulmate is standing at the edge of the biggest decision of their life, and the sealed envelope hidden inside the secret document has remained untouched. For one reason alone. Stay until the very end, because what was written inside that envelope was never meant to be read by just one person, and the final words could reveal why your journey has taken so long. Your soulmate couldn't stop looking at the envelope. It was old enough to show the marks of time, yet somehow it remained perfectly sealed. Dust had gathered around the edges, but the paper itself seemed almost untouched, as if destiny had been protecting it until this exact season. They turned it over carefully, hoping to find another clue. On the back, written in smaller handwriting, were 8 simple words. Only open when fear no longer controls your heart. The moment they read those words, they closed their eyes. Every excuse they had made over the years came rushing back. Every opportunity they had let pass. Every message they almost sent but deleted. Every time they convinced themselves that silence was safer than honesty. Suddenly, they realized the envelope had never been locked by glue, it had been locked by fear. For years they believed they weren't ready. But standing there now, holding the document that had quietly followed them through so many chapters of life, they understood something life-changing. They were never waiting for the perfect moment. They were waiting for the courage to create it. Their hands trembled as they carefully lifted one corner of the envelope. For a second they almost opened it completely. But once again they stopped. The words on the front echoed inside their heart. Open together someday. They couldn't ignore them. Deep inside, they knew those words mattered. This wasn't just another letter. It was meant to become the beginning of a new chapter, not the ending of an old one. They gently placed the envelope back inside the document and whispered, "I'll wait a little longer." Yet something unexpected happened that very evening. While organizing old belongings, they discovered another forgotten box hidden at the back of a shelf. They hadn't opened it in years. Inside were ordinary things at first: old photographs, ticket stubs, birthday cards, small memories from different seasons of life. But beneath everything else was a tiny key wrapped inside a faded piece of cloth. They stared at it in complete confusion. Where had it come from? What did it unlock? The answer arrived almost immediately. Their eyes returned to the secret document. Attached to the inside cover, barely noticeable beneath years of folded pages, was a tiny locked compartment they had never paid attention to before. Their heartbeat became louder with every passing second. Slowly, they picked up the key and placed it into the tiny lock. It fit perfectly. The compartment clicked open. Inside wasn't money. It wasn't jewelry. It wasn't anything valuable in the ordinary sense. Instead, there was a single folded page with today's date written across the top, years before today had ever arrived. Your soulmate couldn't believe what they were seeing. How could they have written today's date so long ago? With shaking hands, they unfolded the page. The first sentence made them completely speechless. If you are reading this today, then the waiting season is almost over. Tears filled their eyes. Before they could even continue, line after line described emotions they were feeling right now. As though the person who wrote it had somehow looked into the future. The letter spoke about finally choosing courage over fear. It spoke about trusting divine timing instead of human doubt. It spoke about a connection that would survive every delay because it had been built on something deeper than coincidence. Then came the final paragraph. There will come a day when you stop searching for signs because the person you've been waiting for will no longer be a mystery. When that day comes, don't let your past fears speak louder than your future happiness. Your soulmate lowered the letter and quietly smiled through their tears. For the first time in years, peace replaced uncertainty. They no longer wondered whether destiny had forgotten them. They realized destiny had been preparing this moment all along. But just before they placed the letter back into the compartment, one final object slipped out and landed softly on the floor. It was a small card with only one sentence written across it. The final truth isn't inside this document, it's waiting in the person this document was always written for. The moment your soulmate read those words, they finally understood. The greatest secret had never been the journal, the envelope, the hidden compartment, or even the letters. The greatest secret was the connection itself. And now, with nothing left to hide, only one final chapter remains before the entire truth is revealed. To be continued, don't scroll. This is the final chapter. If this message found you today, your soulmate's secret document has reached the moment it was always waiting for. Stay until the very end, because the last truth isn't hidden inside a letter, an envelope, or a photograph. It's hidden inside the choice that both hearts are about to make. Your soulmate sat in complete silence with every page spread out before them. The journal, the forgotten notes, the old photograph, the sealed envelope, the hidden compartment, every piece of the mystery now rested in front of them. For years they believed the document contained the answers. But now they understood something far more important. The document had never been the destination. It had only been the bridge leading them toward the courage they had been searching for all along. They slowly closed the final page and placed both hands on top of it. Instead of fear, they felt peace. Instead of confusion, they felt clarity. Instead of wondering whether destiny was real, they finally accepted that some connections enter our lives quietly, grow through patience, and reveal themselves only when both hearts are ready. They remembered every night they questioned everything. Every time they almost gave up. Every moment they convinced themselves that the connection would disappear if they ignored it long enough. But it never disappeared. It only became stronger. Looking back, they realized that every delay had taught them something they couldn't have learned any other way. Every disappointment had made them wiser. Every closed door had redirected them toward a better path. Even the painful chapters now carried meaning because without them, they would never have become the person capable of protecting the love they had once feared. Then they opened the very first page of the document one final time. Written across the top, in handwriting they had almost forgotten, was a sentence that suddenly made perfect sense. One day you won't need these pages anymore, because the person you've been writing about will become part of your real story. Tears filled their eyes as they smiled. They finally understood why they had never thrown the document away. It wasn't because they were holding on to the past. It was because the past had been quietly preparing them for the future. They stood up, carefully, placed every page back into the folder, and tied it closed one last time. This time it wasn't to hide it. It was to honor the journey that had brought them this far. As they carried the document toward its old hiding place, they suddenly stopped. For the first time, they didn't put it back. Instead, they placed it somewhere it could easily be found again. It was their way of telling themselves that they would never hide from the truth again. The greatest secret had already been revealed. Courage had finally become stronger than fear. They looked out the window as the sun slowly began to rise. A gentle feeling settled over their heart, not because they knew exactly what tomorrow would bring, but because they no longer needed every answer before taking the next step. They trusted that the same unseen guidance that had protected every chapter until now would continue leading both of you forward. At that moment, they whispered a quiet promise. No more running. No more hiding. No more letting fear decide my future. It wasn't a promise made to the document. It wasn't a promise made to the past. It was a promise made to the future they had spent so many years dreaming about. And somewhere deep inside, they felt as though your heart had heard those words, even from a distance. Because some connections don't begin the day two people meet. They begin the day two souls choose to believe that love is stronger than fear, patience is stronger than doubt, and hope is stronger than every obstacle placed in their path. If this message has touched your heart, let it remind you of something important. Stories like this are meant to inspire reflection, hope, and courage. Whether life brings unexpected reunions or new beginnings, the most meaningful relationships are built through honesty, kindness, trust, and the choices we make each day. Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't discovering a hidden document. Sometimes it's discovering the courage to open your own heart. And perhaps, that is the real secret your soulmate story was always trying to reveal. The end.